Hey artists, here is your instruction on completing your watercolor painting worksheet. So you can see here my technique worksheet underneath my materials. I've got my palette here with my brush. I have a tiny cup of water and I have a paper towel. This is going to be helpful to clean my brush and do anything else I might need to do. So starting out with your paints, and on this worksheet, you can use any color that you would like for these exercises. It's not about the color, it's about working with the paints. So here we are practicing the different values of watercolor paint. To get your lightest value, you use the most water and very little paint. So to use watercolor paints, if you've never done them before, you put the brush in the water and then you go ahead and put that on top of the color you want to work with. Say I'm interested in red. So I am going to then press on the red here and it's going to mix up a paint. And since I want to start with a lot of water, my lightest wash, excuse me, I'm going to go ahead and add a little extra dot of water. You have to work quickly with watercolor. You cannot play with them a lot or they do not work out well. Your goal is to practice staying inside the lines and then move on to your next box. So I want this one to have more paint. So I'm going to continue. You can see my brush working at that caked paint in there. So I can add more and more. Now I don't want to go too dark too quickly or it may not work out well for me. Again, get that paint all the way up to the edges of the box without going over if possible. But if you scrub at your paper too much, you're going to get an uneven box. So try to just get it on there and then stop. So that last box should be the most saturated you can get your paint to go. So now the next box, instead of going down to grated wash next, which is tricky, I think you should go over to the flat wash. So you're trying to make a medium value of watercolor paint to fill the entire box, which is much bigger than we had the first time around. So again, any color will be fine. I'm going to go ahead and work with something different on this just for the sake of doing something different. What I find helpful if I will need to make a lot of paint is to go ahead and kind of preload lots of water in there so that I have a lot of paint soupy on the surface there so I'm not constantly having to recreate. And then you do have to work quickly. So you can lay your brush down on the side. That helps to cover a lot of surface area. But you still have to get all the way to the edge, even and solid, which can be difficult. Don't let any puddles form, and at the same time, don't have any dry spots. And as I said before, sometimes you need to know when to just stop and take your hands off it, or you're only going to make it worse. So hopefully my air bubbles here kind of fade away, and it looks a little more flat like it's supposed to. Moving into the graded wash, now it gets even trickier. You're trying to make this light to medium to dark all happen at once in sort of a fade. So what is difficult there is, of course, that these paints, when they dry, they're going to go ahead and leave a line. I kind of like to start on the dark end and then I can almost paint with water. So let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to start with blue this time because, again, I'm just trying out all the colors. I'm going to mix up a nice saturated blue. So I only put a little bit of water, but I'm going to swirl my brush a lot to try to wake up that paint and get as much of it as I can. I'm going to go ahead and apply that blue as richly as I can. So really thick blue. And then I'm going to dot into some water. And I'm going to mix them right there on the paper. But I don't want to go to white too quickly. So I'm going to blend these. I'm going to dot into more water. and blend here and drag that out and dot more water in. Pull that blue with me though. I don't want to fade this out too quickly to wait to water. Dot into more. And I've faded out to white. Now I think I could do a much better job. I might need to go back and play with this just a smidge, which is dangerous. Because if I mess it up, it'll show watercolor is not very forgiving, but you can layer on top the same color. That's more of the gradual transition I want to see. Moving into the dry brush box to the right here, says use very little water and a lot of paint. Keep painting in the box even after the paint has run out, leaving a textured dry brush paint stroke. So same deal, any color will do. Might as well grab something dark and visible. I'm going to grab some black. So it says very little water, a lot of paint. So I'm going to swirl. And then I'm just going to brush. I am trying to create texture. That is on purpose. So use the brush after the paint has run out. Stay in the box, but create texture. You're experimenting to see what this watercolor paint will do. Moving into mixed colors here, this next scale. I need to apply one color of paint on the left, one on the right, and blend them in the middle. Again, staying inside the box. So pick two similar colors that are next to each other in your palette, blue and green. You could do blue and red, but I wouldn't recommend it. Red and orange, orange and yellow. I don't know why purple's out of order. Don't do purple with yellow, please, oh please. I'm going to go orange and yellow since I haven't really used either of those yet. So the two should just fade together almost as if by magic. Last two boxes. Here you are experimenting with wet and wet. That means you have a piece of wet paper already, and then you are going to make a mark on top with the paint. So first you want to get your paint stirred up and ready to go. I'm going to go with purple, as I have not yet used that. So I'm going to have some purple paint already on top of the palette, ready to go, and enough to drip with. Then I need to paint this box, no matter that my water is not perfectly clean. But I need to have the paper wet, like shiny, so I can see it. If you can't see it, it does not count. Then grab that paint and just touch it, and you should see it bleed out. Now, I don't have quite enough to make the bleed that I want. Let me see, there's a better drop. You should see that paint flow and sort of spread through those spots. Now, I'm going to go ahead and do a couple dots in there. Don't do so many that they blend together, but you can do a couple if they're not bleeding out as far as you'd like to see. Now, let me stop before I make a mess. Last but not least, blotting. So blot with a paper towel to remove some of the paint. This is again like dry brush trying to create texture. Don't blot the whole thing out. So I'm going to pick another color. I've used everything at this point. So I will go back to blue because it's pretty. Here I go. I'm going to paint the whole thing blue, but then I'm going to dab at it with my paintbrush to try to remove some paint. So I need it to be damp still. I need to see that shine of the surface of the water. And then I'm going to take that paper towel that I had at the start. I'm going to blot at it. So if you bunch it up in your fingers, and then see how I'm leaving behind a texture? That's what I want to do. Don't over blot, because then you won't leave behind a texture. You'll just take all the paint away. I need to stop there or I'm going to take all the paint away and it's going to be even again. So that is how to complete your watercolor painting technique worksheet, start to finish, with your watercolor paint palette.